To every parent watching this, pray that you never raise a child who will one day bring shame to your name. This is the story of a church girl named Sandra. She was only 19, yet her heart felt untouched by the world, like a flower that had never known dust. Her smile could warm even the coldest room, and her voice didn't just sing, it moved people. It felt as if heaven itself spoke through her. Every Sunday when Sandra sang in church, something unusual happened. The entire building would fall silent. Even the restless children would stop playing. She would close her eyes, lift her hands high like she was reaching for something beyond this world, and then the tears would begin. Some cried loudly, others silently, but no one remained untouched. Even Mama Achinier, who never cried, once whispered, "This girl is not ordinary." Sandra didn't wear makeup. She wore long skirts that flowed behind her with quiet dignity. Her hair was always covered. She walked gently, spoke softly, and never raised her voice. While other girls talked about boys, she would simply smile and look away. Her father, Pastor Paul Adams, stood proudly in the pulpit and said, "Look at my daughter. Proof that God still creates perfection." The church clapped loudly. Women prayed for daughters like Sandra, and men believed she would bring peace to any man who married her. Sandra didn't just read the Bible, she lived by it. When her mother once fell sick, she didn't rush for medicine. She knelt beside her and prayed, "Oh God, heal my mother," and by morning, her mother was strong again. People believed Sandra was not ordinary, that she was made from something divine, a golden child, a shining light, a dove among crows. And maybe they were right. But what they didn't understand was that even the brightest light carries a hidden darkness, and Sandra's own darkness had already begun to grow quietly. When Sandra gained admission into the university, the entire church celebrated like a miracle had happened again. Her father smiled with pride and declared, "The Lord has done it again." Her mother sang joyfully as they prepared her for school. They bought her new clothes, a small gas cooker, a Bible with golden edges, and a phone. On the day she left, Pastor Paul placed his hand on her head and prayed for a long time, almost as if he was trying to protect her from something unseen. "Go and shine for God," he said. Sandra nodded, but there was something new in her eyes, something stronger than before. She packed her Bible first, then her clothes, and small papers filled with handwritten verses. Her bag was not just filled with belongings, it was filled with faith. At the university, her hostel room had 4 girls. Only one of them was like Sandra. The others, Doris, Amanda, and Lola, were completely different. They were loud, fast, and full of life in a way Sandra had never known. They wore short dresses, long lashes, and perfumes that filled the room. They laughed loudly and returned late at night with food and drinks. Sandra stayed in her corner, neat and quiet. She pasted Bible verses beside her bed like protection. Be not conformed to this world. Flee from every appearance of evil. Every night, she prayed softly on her knees. Doris would roll her eyes and say, "Look, Holy Mary has started again." Amanda would whisper, "One day she will join us." Sandra would just smile and say calmly, "This life will not last. God is watching." Lola would clap and laugh at her. They mocked her, but she did not change. She continued reading her Bible every morning, listening to gospel songs, and calling her parents every Sunday. Even when her roommates talked about men and money, she ignored them. She didn't envy them, she pitied them. One evening Amanda asked, "Don't you want to enjoy life a little?" Sandra replied calmly, "I am enjoying life. God is enough for me." They laughed and said she would get tired one day, but Sandra remained focused, not knowing that temptation does not always come loudly. Sometimes it enters quietly like air. Everything remained fine until one day it wasn't. Sandra sat on her bed staring at her phone, waiting, but nothing came. No messages, no calls. She refreshed her banking app again and again until she saw 0.50 Nigerian nairas.
Her throat went dry.
She called her father, no answer. She called again, still nothing. Later, her mother sent a message. "My dear, things are tight right now. We will send money soon. Please manage." Sandra felt her chest tighten. She looked at her food shelf and saw only 1 cup of rice and a half sachet of salt. That night, she cooked the last of it. Her stomach growled loudly as she ate slowly, trying to make it last. Across the room, Doris laughed while opening fried rice and chicken. Amanda brought out suya and Lola drank juice happily. The smell filled the room, making Sandra's hunger worse. She pressed her wrapper against her chest and whispered, "God will provide." The next day, she borrowed money from her friend Grace and promised to pay back soon. Grace agreed but warned her it would be the last time. Sandra used the money carefully, buying only rice, groundnuts, and water. But by the 3rd week, everything finished again. Her body grew weak, her steps became slow, and her eyes lost their brightness. At night, she cried quietly into her pillow, but she refused to call home again because she didn't want to worry them. Instead, she prayed, "Father, please open a door for me." But the door that opened was not what she expected. That evening, the room was lively again. Music played softly as the girls dressed up. Doris held a shining gold dress and threw it onto Sandra's bed, saying, "Wear it just one night. You will eat, you will laugh, and nothing will happen to you." Sandra stared at the dress, its shine almost pulling her in. She shook her head and said no, but when the girls left and the room became silent, everything changed. She sat alone under the flickering light, her phone almost dead, her stomach empty, and her body weak. She looked again at the dress lying on her bed as if it was waiting for her. Slowly, she stood up, picked it up, and held it close. "Only this once," she whispered. Doris returned shortly after and smiled when she saw Sandra holding the dress. Before Sandra could change her mind, they quickly began transforming her. They did her makeup, fixed her hair, and dressed her up. Sandra sat still as her heart raced. When they finally turned the mirror toward her, she froze. The girl staring back at her was no longer the Sandra she knew. Her lips were red, her skin glowed, and the dress fit her perfectly. She looked beautiful, but dangerous in a way she had never imagined. Doris leaned close and whispered, "You look different." Sandra didn't respond because deep inside, she knew something had changed. By 9:30 that night, a black car arrived outside. It was long, quiet, and mysterious. They entered it together, and Sandra sat silently, holding her purse tightly. Doris handed her a drink and told her to sip it. It tasted sweet at first but burned her throat. When they arrived at the club, everything felt overwhelming. Lights flashed, music was loud, and people moved wildly. They were taken to a quiet section where a man stood waiting. He looked older, calm, and confident. His presence alone made Sandra uncomfortable. "So you are the pastor's daughter," he said slowly. His tone was too calm, like someone used to this. "This is Philip," Doris said as she introduced him. Philip smiled, but there was something in his eyes that didn't feel right. Sandra laughed at things she didn't understand and ate food she couldn't even pronounce. On the outside, she looked fine, but inside, something kept whispering to her that she didn't belong there. And slowly, that voice inside her began to fade, as if something darker was taking its place. She danced a little, trying to blend in, trying to forget where she came from. When she got tired, he stepped closer, his hand sliding confidently around her waist as if he had done it many times before. He leaned in and whispered, "Let me take you somewhere quiet." There was something in his voice, something calm yet controlling. They left the club without anyone asking questions. The hotel room was cold, unusually cold, like a place that had swallowed many secrets before her. Sandra stood in the middle of the room, her eyes wide, taking in everything at once. The bed was too big, the lights too dim, the silence too loud. Her feet refused to move. "I'll take care of you," Philip said as he walked closer. "You're safe with me." Sandra's eyes quickly moved to the door, but her phone was dead. She had no transport money, no airtime, no one she could call. The realization hit her slowly. She was trapped. Philip reached for her waist again. This time she flinched. He smiled softly, but his eyes told a different story, sharp and patient. "Relax," he said. But inside her chest, her mother's voice echoed loudly. The devil gives with one hand and takes more with the other. Sandra held back her tears because deep down she knew this was the price, and somehow she no longer knew how to say no. After that night, something inside her went quiet. She didn't cry, she didn't speak about it. The next morning, she simply washed her face, wore her church dress, and walked into class like nothing had happened. Her roommates looked at her and smiled knowingly. "She's one of us now," Doris said with a wink, and this time, nobody argued. The next Friday, they went out again, and again the week after that. Sandra was no longer the girl sitting quietly in the corner. Now she stood confidently in front of the mirror, rubbing cream slowly on her legs, spraying perfume that made heads turn. Her dresses became shorter, her lips stayed red, and her walk changed, slower, calculated, like someone who knew the power she carried. Sandra became two people living inside one body. In the morning, she was still the church girl, Bible in hand, long skirts flowing, eyes closed in worship, voice soft and convincing, prayers deep enough to move hearts. She still attended fellowship, still sat in front, still shouted hallelujah, with the same passion. But when night came, another version of her took over. Lipstick bright like blood, wigs in different colors, heels clicking sharply against the ground, clothes hugging her body like secrets waiting to be discovered. She no longer waited for invitations. Now she chose the places herself. "I heard tonight's party is in Lekki, let's go there," she would say, adjusting her heels confidently. Even Doris began to look at her differently. Amanda respected her. Lola whispered, "This girl has changed." And she truly had. Sandra no longer depended on anyone. She now had perfumes her mother could never afford, 2 phones, dollars in her purse, designer bags, and a lifestyle that replaced her old struggles. She stopped asking her parents for money, and that alone made them proud. "You're doing well?" her father would ask. "Yes, Daddy. God is good," she would reply calmly. "You're not lacking?" her mother would ask. "No, Mommy. I'm even helping others," Sandra would lie gently. And they believed her because she had always been that perfect child. They didn't question her. They didn't notice the cracks, the slight changes in her tone, the shorter replies, the hidden distance. After all, who would doubt a girl who still quoted psalms and prayed in tongues? No one. Not her lecturers, not her neighbors, not even Grace, and definitely not her parents. Whenever she returned home during holidays, Sandra played her role perfectly. Long skirts, no makeup, hair tied neatly. She woke up early for devotion, quoted scriptures effortlessly, even taught children in church. Her parents glowed with pride. Her father would say, "This girl is heaven-bound," while her mother whispered, "You're better than I was at your age." In church, she remained untouchable, a symbol of purity, a voice that led others into deep worship. People trusted her completely. But once she returned to campus, the other Sandra took over again. The lifestyle had become addictive, the attention, the money, the control. Men gave her whatever she wanted: phones, trips, dollars, gifts. By the time she finished school, something else began to grow inside her: fear. The thought of going home felt heavy. Home, where eyes watched closely, where her father prayed loudly, where her mother woke before dawn to worship. Still, she packed her bags and returned. When she arrived, her father embraced her tightly. "Welcome, my jewel. God has spoken. You will now serve fully in ministry." Sandra forced a smile. "Yes, Daddy." The next day, she resumed her role effortlessly. Long skirts, morning devotion, powerful Bible reading. People clapped, elders praised her. She worked in the church during the day, led choir in the evening. But at night, the truth returned. She hid her makeup behind her Bible, her red dress behind her prayer robe. Quietly, she slipped out of the house into the night, moving carefully like someone who had done it many times. And outside, the world welcomed her again. The men were still there, even more interested now that she was the pastor's daughter. They paid more, gave more, demanded less explanation. By morning, she returned before anyone noticed, washed her face, and stood again in church, pure and untouched in appearance. No one knew, but she knew. And every time she lifted her hands to worship, they trembled slightly. Church, which once protected her, slowly became her hunting ground. Sandra stood every Sunday leading worship, her voice still powerful, her presence still commanding. But something had changed. Not in her voice, but in the way people looked at her. Men stared longer, smiled differently, their eyes no longer respectful. The first was Brother Felix, a married man with children, always seated in front. After one service, he approached her, praising her voice, holding her hand longer than necessary. The following Sunday, he slipped an envelope into her hand. "For lunch," he whispered. Inside was a large amount of money. Soon, messages followed, checking on her, inviting her over. Sandra didn't resist for long. She visited his house under the excuse of prayer. But there was no prayer, only silence, touches, and another line crossed. After him came Elder Daniel, respected, wealthy, admired. His approach was quieter, more calculated. Money came first, then invitations. Sandra accepted. Then came Pastor Jerry, young and charismatic. He called her for private prayer sessions. Inside his office, the lines blurred again. Words of spirituality mixed with actions that were anything but holy. And Sandra didn't stop it. Not anymore. By now, she no longer waited. The men came to her. They brought gifts, money, promises. She gave them silence in return, no resistance, no explanation, just quiet acceptance. Her parents saw nothing. They still believed their daughter was walking with God. Sandra's life became comfortable, dangerously comfortable. Multiple phones, expensive wigs, foreign shoes, dollars hidden under her bed. Lies became routine. "I'm going for fasting," she would say. "I'm helping someone pray," she would add. And they believed every word. Her father even told her, "You will take over my ministry one day." Sandra nodded, but inside, her chest tightened. At night, when everything was quiet, she would sit alone, staring at herself in the mirror. The makeup gone, the truth exposed. Tears would fall silently. "God, are you still there?" she whispered. But no answer came. Only silence. Because deep down, she already knew whatever was blessing her now. It wasn't coming from heaven. They came with money, with gifts, with promises, and with every visit, they took something from her. Not just her body, but pieces of her soul she could never get back. One morning, Sandra woke up with a sharp pain twisting deep inside her stomach. She rushed to the bathroom and threw up violently, gripping the sink as her body shook. Her head burned. Her knees felt weak like dry leaves in the wind. Her mother knocked gently on the door. "Sandra, are you okay?" Sandra quickly wiped her mouth and forced her voice to sound normal. "It's just malaria, Mommy. I'll be fine." But days passed, and it didn't stop. The vomiting returned again and again. Her clothes began to feel tight. Her once flat waist refused to stay the same. Her mother started watching closely, noticing what others would ignore. One afternoon, while arranging Sandra's bed, she found something hidden beneath the mattress. A small test strip, still fresh, still clear. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. 2 lines. Her heart dropped instantly. She rushed back to Sandra's room, her voice low but shaking. "Sandra, what is this?" Sandra froze where she stood. Her lips trembled, her body stiff, her mind racing for an answer that would never come. Her mother sat beside her gently. "Talk to me. Who did this to you?" Sandra stared at the wall, her heart beating loudly, like a drum in a silent village. Then her voice broke. "It started in school when the money stopped coming. I was hungry, Mommy. I followed them just once." Tears filled her mother's eyes immediately. Sandra continued, her voice cracking with every word. "I tried to stop, but they kept coming. Brother Felix, Elder Daniel, Pastor Jerry." She listed the names slowly, painfully, names that once stood for holiness. Names that now felt heavy with darkness. Tears streamed down her face. "I don't know who is responsible. I don't even know who to blame." Her mother broke down quietly, covering her mouth as if trying to stop her pain from escaping. She didn't scream. She didn't shout. She simply pulled Sandra close and whispered softly, "Your father must not know, not yet, please, not yet." And just like that, the biggest secret in the house began to grow in silence. Her mother acted quickly. Loose gowns were bought, wide enough to hide the truth. Sandra stopped going out, stayed mostly in her room, walking carefully, eating slowly, praying quietly. Her mother watched every movement, every sign, every change. They whispered in corners, prayed in silence, planned endlessly. "Nobody must know," her mother kept repeating. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. One Sunday morning, the sun rose bright, almost too bright, as if it wanted to expose everything. The church was full. The choir stood ready. Pastor Paul Adams smiled with pride, unaware of what was about to happen. Sandra stepped forward in a long gown, her scarf tied tightly. She held the microphone and closed her eyes like she always did. She raised her hands and began to sing. But halfway through the first verse, her body failed her. Her knees buckled. Her voice broke. And then she collapsed. Gasps filled the church instantly. People rushed forward. In the confusion, her gown shifted slightly, and her belly showed. Not flat. Not hidden. Not deniable. The whispers spread faster than fire. "Is she pregnant? How is that possible? She's the pastor's daughter." Sandra slowly opened her eyes, her ears catching broken words: shame, disgrace, disbelief. They carried her out. Pastor Paul rushed forward, panic all over his face. "What's happening?" he asked, but his wife held his arm tightly. "Let's go home. I'll explain." But it was already too late. The truth had escaped, and there was no pulling it back. That evening, the church turned silent. No music, no joy, no worship. Just tension hanging in the air. Chairs were arranged in a circle. Elders, deacons, members, everyone gathered. All waiting, all whispering. Pastor Paul stood in front, his hands shaking, his Bible pressed tightly to his chest. His wife sat beside him, pale and quiet. Sandra sat alone, her head bowed, her hands trembling over her growing belly. Pastor Paul cleared his throat slowly, his voice weak. "Sandra, is it true?" She nodded. "Yes." The word landed heavily. "Who is responsible?" he asked, his voice breaking. Silence followed. Then Sandra looked up. Her eyes were tired, empty of fear. "I don't know," she said calmly. "It could be anyone." The room exploded with shock. Murmurs filled the air. But Sandra didn't stop. One by one, she began to mention names. Elder Daniel. Heads turned instantly. His hands trembled. Brother Felix. His wife screamed in disbelief. Pastor Jerry. He stood up and walked out, unable to face anyone. And still, she continued. More names. More men. Men who once stood as examples. Men who preached holiness. Men who prayed loudly in public. Women cried. Some fainted. The men stayed silent or walked away in shame. Pastor Paul didn't move. His body froze. His Bible slipped from his hands and hit the ground. Slowly, he sat down, empty, broken, destroyed. The daughter he once called his pride had now become the storm that shattered his name. Sandra, once the example every parent prayed for, became the warning every parent gave. "Don't be like her," they whispered. Her pictures disappeared from the church walls. The choir replaced her. Pastor Paul stopped preaching. He sat quietly every Sunday, staring at the ground like a man who had lost everything. Her mother withdrew from society, avoiding gatherings, unable to face the whispers that followed her everywhere. Sandra stayed locked inside the house. Curtains closed. Silence everywhere. The Bible beside her bed slowly gathered dust. Her belly grew steadily, each day reminding her of the life she could no longer hide from. She spent most of her time alone, hugging herself, staring at nothing. The same hands that once lifted in worship now hid her face. The same voice that once filled the church now barely whispered. And every night, under the quiet gaze of the moon, Sandra repeated the same words over and over again, like a broken soul searching for meaning. If only they knew what I did after church. But now they knew. And that truth had destroyed everything.